May thy servant Camilla, who wears this crown, be filled by thine abundant grace and with all princely virtues.
Everyone thought the title question surrounding Camilla was answered the day the crown touched her head inside Westminster Abbey. It was not, because buried inside the royal system is a rule almost nobody talks about, one that puts an invisible expiration date on everything Camilla fought 18 years to win. And now that question has quietly taken another turn, the most revealing one yet. Not because of anything Camilla did, not because of anything Charles signed, but because the decision about what she is called next has already started slipping into the hands of someone else entirely. The forbidden title. Because in this family, titles are never just decorations. They are verdicts, written in advance, deciding who will matter after a reign ends and who will quietly fade from the official record. And to understand the verdict now hanging over Camilla, you have to go back to April 2005, to the day Camilla Parker Bowles married the Prince of Wales in a modest civil ceremony at Windsor Guildhall. It was the smallest royal wedding in living memory, and the reason was written into every detail. The couple knew the public was watching for any sign of triumph, any hint that the woman blamed for the collapse of the most famous marriage of the 20th century was being rewarded with glory. So, the palace made a decision that seemed unthinkable by the normal rules of monarchy. Camilla, as the wife of the Prince of Wales, was legally entitled to be called the Princess of Wales. She never used it. That title belonged, in the public heart, to one woman only, Diana. Using it would have been a provocation the monarchy could not survive. Instead, Camilla took a secondary title from her husband, and Britain came to know her as the Duchess of Cornwall. But the palace went further than that. Clarence House announced, at the time of the wedding, an intention that stunned constitutional experts. When Charles eventually became king, his wife would not be known as Queen. She would be styled Princess Consort, a title that had never actually existed in British history. Stop and think about what that announcement really meant. The monarchy was inventing a brand new, diminished designation just to keep one woman away from the word queen. That was the starting point of this entire story. A promise made to a grieving and angry public that Camilla would never wear the title that every previous wife of a British king had carried for 1,000 years. And for years, that promise looked solid. Officials repeated it. Commentators treated it as settled law. The Princess Consort plan sat on the official record like a locked door. Except, the door was never actually locked. And behind the scenes, according to royal biographers who spent years interviewing palace insiders, someone very patient had already started working the handle. A patient campaign. Here is where the story stops feeling like protocol and starts feeling like strategy. In 2010, during a rare American television interview, Prince Charles was asked directly whether Camilla would become queen when he took the throne. His answer was not a denial. He paused and then suggested that it remained to be seen, that it could happen. 5 words of hesitation, broadcast to millions, and suddenly the Princess Consort promise did not sound so permanent anymore. Royal authors noticed. Christopher Anderson, who wrote a major biography of Charles, later claimed that the Princess Consort plan was never sincere at all. According to his account, Charles had always intended for his wife to be queen, and had worked steadily over nearly 2 decades to make it possible, waiting for public anger to soften year by year. Whether you accept that interpretation or not, the public record supports the pattern. Every few years, the language shifted slightly. The denials became vaguer. The commitment to Princess Consort was quietly downgraded from a promise to an intention, and then it simply stopped being mentioned at all. Meanwhile, Camilla herself was doing the slowest, hardest work in public life, rebuilding an image one engagement at a time. She took on patronages that no one could criticize, championing literacy, supporting survivors of domestic abuse, campaigning on osteoporosis after watching her own mother suffer from it. She endured years of hostile coverage without public complaint. Polling that once showed overwhelming opposition to her ever becoming queen began very gradually to move. And inside the family, something even more important was happening. Queen Elizabeth, who had famously kept her distance during the early years of the relationship, was slowly warming. The woman who once avoided Camilla was now seen laughing beside her at engagements. Invitations followed, honors followed. In 2016, Camilla was appointed to the Privy Council, a signal that she was being woven into the constitutional fabric of the state itself. Each of these moves seemed small on its own. Together, they were preparing the ground for an announcement that would rewrite the deal made in 2005, because the one person with the authority to kill the princess consort, planned forever, was the queen herself. And in February 2022, in the final year of her life, she picked up her pen. The Queen decides. The announcement came on the eve of the Platinum Jubilee, 70 years to the day since Elizabeth acceded to the throne. In a written message to the nation, the Queen looked ahead to a future she knew was approaching, and she expressed her sincere wish that when Charles became king, Camilla would be known as Queen Consort, as she continued what Elizabeth called her loyal service. Run that sentence back in your mind, because almost every word of it was doing heavy lifting. Sincere wish meant this was not a suggestion. Coming from the sovereign, it was as close to a command as the system allows. Queen Consort meant the princess consort invention was dead, buried by the one voice no courtier could argue with. And loyal service was a public verdict, the reigning monarch personally vouching for the woman the country had spent decades refusing to forgive. Before we go any further into what happened next, and into the twist that nobody saw coming about Camilla's future, take 1 second to subscribe so you never miss these updates. Because this story is still moving, and the next chapter is going to be decided sooner than most people think. 7 months after the Jubilee message, Queen Elizabeth died at Balmoral, and in that instant, automatically, without ceremony or signature, Charles became king and Camilla became Queen Consort. The transformation the palace had once promised would never happen had happened in a single breath. The first official statements from the palace that evening referred to the king and the Queen Consort, exactly as Elizabeth had wished. For most royal wives in history, that would have been the end of the title question. The wife of the king is the queen. It has been that way for centuries, but Camilla's case was never going to be that simple, because her title still carried one extra word, one small qualifier that set her apart from every consort before her. And within months, that word was about to disappear, in a way that tells you everything about how this palace really operates. The vanishing word. In April 2023, invitations went out for the coronation, and sharp-eyed observers noticed something immediately. The card did not say Queen Consort Camilla. It invited guests to the coronation of Their Majesties King Charles III and Queen Camilla. The word consort was simply gone. No press conference, no formal explanation at first. Just a piece of engraved stationery quietly announcing that the last barrier had fallen. When journalists pressed, a senior royal aide explained the reasoning. The consort label had made sense in the early months of the reign to distinguish Camilla from the late Queen Elizabeth, while the country was still in mourning. But the coronation, the aide said, was the appropriate moment to begin using Queen Camilla in an official capacity, noting that all former wives of kings had historically been known simply as Queen followed by their first name. And on May 6, 2023, Coronation Day itself, the change became total. As the crown was placed on Camilla's head inside Westminster Abbey, the royal family's official website was updated. Queen Consort was deleted. Queen Camilla took its place. The woman who was once promised she would never be queen was now crowned, anointed, and listed as exactly that on the monarchy's own record. 18 years. That is how long it took to travel from Princess Consort, an invented title designed to keep her small, to Queen Camilla, with no qualifier at all. It may be the most complete image rehabilitation in modern royal history, and it happened so gradually that most people never noticed each individual step. So, the question was settled, the verdict was in. Camilla had won, except that is not how monarchy works, because in the royal system, no title is ever truly permanent for a consort. Every crown that is placed on the head of a king's wife comes with that invisible expiration date attached, and Camilla's is no different. Her queenship, the entire status she fought half a lifetime to reach, is legally tied to one thing only, her husband's heartbeat. And that is where this story stops being about the past and becomes about a decision that has not been made yet. The automatic moment. There is a phrase constitutional experts use that sounds cold until you understand it. The throne is never empty. The moment a British monarch dies, the heir becomes sovereign instantly and automatically. No coronation required, no proclamation needed to make it real. When Charles dies, in that exact second, William is king. Historians describe it as something that happens by itself, faster than any announcement. Now follow the chain one step further, because this is the part that concerns Camilla directly. The moment William becomes king, his wife becomes queen. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, would immediately be the queen, because in the royal system, the queen is, by definition, the wife of the reigning king. There is only ever one, which means that in the same instant Catherine gains the title, Camilla loses it. Not through any decision, not through any document, not through anyone's cruelty. The title simply moves, the way it has moved for 1,000 years, from one woman to the next. Camilla cannot remain the queen, because the country would then have two of them, and the system does not allow that confusion. It is worth pausing on how strange that moment will feel from the inside. Catherine has spent more than a decade being prepared for it, and yet no amount of preparation changes the raw mechanics. One phone call from a doctor, and two women trade places in the official order of the realm before either of them has spoken a word. Camilla would wake up that morning as Her Majesty the Queen and go to sleep that night as something the palace has not yet publicly defined. No transition period, no gradual handover, no farewell tour with the old title. The system was built centuries before anyone worried about how it might feel. She also cannot ever reign herself. This is worth saying clearly because it is one of the most searched questions about her. The line of succession is fixed by descent and by act of parliament, and Camilla, who married into the family and has no blood claim, is not in it and never can be. Her two children from her first marriage are not in it either. Whatever happens, the crown passes to William and then to his children, and Camilla's constitutional role ends the moment her husband's reign does. So, the real question, the one the palace has never formally answered, is this. If Camilla outlives Charles, what is she then? What do you call a crowned and anointed queen after the crown has moved on without her? The answer lies in one of the strangest and most rarely used titles in the entire royal vocabulary, a designation that has not been carried in Britain for nearly 200 years. And the conversation around it is exactly where this story just took its newest turn. The Dowager Question. The title is Queen Dowager. It is an old term with a precise meaning, the widow of a king. A queen dowager keeps her royal rank and her style as Her Majesty, but she is no longer the queen because that word now belongs to the new king's wife. It is a title of memory rather than power, an acknowledgement that she once stood beside the throne even though she no longer does. Britain has not had one in a very long time. The last woman to formally hold the position was Queen Adelaide, the widow of King William IV, who died in 1837 and was succeeded by his niece, Victoria. Adelaide lived on as Queen Dowager for more than a decade, a queen without a king, watching a new reign unfold from the edges of court life. Since then, the title has basically sat in a drawer, untouched, waiting for someone to need it again. Go further back, and the list of women who carried it reads like a tour of England's most turbulent centuries. Joan of Navarre held the position after the death of Henry IV, and her reward for it was to be accused of witchcraft by her own stepson and imprisoned for years. Catherine Parr, the sixth and final wife of Henry VIII, became a dowager, queen at 34, and used the freedom it gave her to publish books and remarry within months. The title has always meant the same two things at once: enduring honor and the end of real influence. Whichever version of it Camilla eventually receives, she would be stepping into a role that has historically been defined by what it no longer includes. Now, you might be wondering about the most famous royal widow of the modern age, and this is where the story gets delicate. When King George VI died in 1952, his widow was technically a queen dowager too, but she was never called that. Because her daughter was the new sovereign, she took the warmer, more personal style of Queen Mother. And that is how an entire generation knew her. The Queen Mother became one of the most beloved figures in the country, and her title was a huge part of that affection. Camilla can never use it, and the reason cuts to the deepest wound in this entire saga. The Queen Mother title exists for the mother of the reigning monarch. Camilla is not William's mother. His mother was Diana. Royal commentators have noted that even attempting anything close to that style would be unthinkable, precisely because of the memory of the woman whose marriage collapsed in the shadow of Charles and Camilla's relationship. Nearly 30 years after Diana's death, her presence still draws hard lines around what Camilla can and cannot be called. So the path seems to point in one direction. Queen Dowager, dusty, correct, historically sound. For years, that has been the standard expert assumption, repeated in article after article. But an assumption is not a decision. And recently, the conversation around Camilla's future title shifted in a way that revealed who will actually make that decision and what it might really look like. The newest turn. In the spring of 2026, royal experts began openly gaming out the transition to the next reign in more specific terms than ever before, and Camilla's future styling was suddenly back on the table. One prominent royal commentator, Victoria Howard, offered a prediction that captures where informed opinion now sits. In her assessment, Camilla will legally retain her queenly rank for life, much as the Queen Mother did. But the palace will most likely style her formally as something like Dowager Queen Camilla, deliberately avoiding any echo of the Queen Mother title out of respect for Diana's memory. Notice what is buried inside that prediction, because it is the real turn in this story. Legally retaining rank while being formally styled, something else means Camilla's future title is not automatic at all. It is a choice. Royal observers have pointed out that she could, in theory, be styled several different ways. The full traditional Queen Dowager, a softer variation placing Dowager before her name. Even, in one scenario floated by commentators, a reversion towards something quieter, though most experts consider that unlikely. And the person who decides is not Charles. Constitutional writers are clear on this point. Once the reign changes, decisions about styling, precedents, residences, and public roles pass to the new sovereign. The shape of Camilla's final chapter, in other words, rests substantially with William, guided by palace advice, government counsel, public sentiment, and, one assumes, Camilla's own wishes. The man whose childhood was marked by the collapse of his parents' marriage will hold significant influence over what the woman at the center of that history is called for the rest of her life. There is a reassuring detail inside the fine print, and it deserves to be said plainly. Nothing under discussion would strip Camilla of royal rank itself. Constitutional writers note that a Dowager Queen remains Her Majesty for life, keeping the style and precedence she held as consort. The crown she was anointed with in 2023 cannot be unanointed. She would no longer be the queen, because that description can only ever belong to the wife of the living king. What changes is the definite article. It sounds like a small grammatical shift. Inside a system built entirely on words, it is everything. The practical questions stack up quickly from there, and experts have started addressing those too. As a dowager, Camilla would have no constitutional role whatsoever. Whether she remains a working royal at all would reportedly be a matter for the new king to determine. Commentators expect she would likely continue, supporting her long-standing charities, particularly her work on osteoporosis, domestic violence, and literacy, health permitting. There is even informed speculation about where she would live, with some experts suggesting she may simply remain at Clarence House, a residence William has no personal attachment to and no obvious need for. None of this is hostile, and every serious expert frames these as questions of protocol, not punishment. But the fact remains that the woman who fought 2 decades for the word queen now faces a future in which that word will be modified, qualified, and ultimately handed back. And if you think a title in this family cannot be touched once it has been granted, very recent history says otherwise, loudly. The precedent problem. In the autumn of 2025, King Charles took the extraordinary step of stripping his own brother of his royal titles and honors over the fallout from the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. The former Prince Andrew lost the style of prince and the dukedom of York itself, one of the most dramatic demotions in modern royal history. Interestingly, even that could not touch the deeper machinery. Andrew retained his place in the line of succession because removing someone from that list requires an act of parliament, not a king's displeasure. That episode taught the public 2 lessons that applied directly to Camilla's situation. First, titles are more fragile than they appear. What a monarch grants, circumstances can take away. Second, there is a hard boundary between styling, which the palace controls, and succession law, which only Parliament can change. Camilla's future sits entirely on the styling side of that line. Her title after Charles is a matter of convention and choice, not statute, which is precisely why it remains genuinely open. And that openness is what makes this moment so tense inside royal circles. The monarchy has spent Camilla's entire royal life adjusting her title downward or upward as public feeling allowed. Duchess instead of Princess, Princess Consort instead of Queen, then Queen Consort, then simply Queen. Every step was a negotiation between history, grief, and acceptance. The next step, whatever form it takes, will follow the same pattern, decided as much by public sentiment as by protocol books. There is one more layer worth sitting with, and it is the one that turns all of this from theory into something urgent. Camilla is now in her late 70s, and Charles is himself in his upper 70s, still managing his health under the shadow of the cancer diagnosis he made public in 2024. These are not abstract, distant questions. Palace planners think in decades, but they prepare in years, and the frameworks for the next transition are, by all serious accounts, already being refined. The title question surrounding Camilla is not a parlor game anymore. It is live planning, and it leaves one final question sitting on the table. After everything she survived to get here, what does Camilla actually keep? What remains? Think about what this woman actually pulled off. Camilla achieved something almost no one in modern public life has achieved. She outlasted a level of national hostility that would have destroyed most people, and she did it mostly through silence, patience, and work. The polling that once rejected her softened. The queen who once kept her distance ended her reign by publicly blessing her. The country that swore she would never be queen watched her crowned in Westminster Abbey. And yet, the system she married into guarantees that her greatest title is temporary. Not because anyone is taking revenge, but because that is what a consort's crown is, borrowed light. The moment the source is gone, the light passes to the next reign, and history begins deciding what to remember. There is also a quieter human dimension the protocol books never mention. Camilla did not grow up inside this system. She entered it late, at 57, already carrying a lifetime of ordinary experience, 2 grown children, and a public reputation that had been shredded beyond anything a private citizen should have to endure. Royal observers who have watched her closely often make the same point. She never seemed to want the crown for its own sake. What she appeared to want, engagement after engagement, year after year, was something far simpler: to stop being treated as an intruder in her own marriage. The title fight was always a proxy war for that, which is why this latest turn matters more than a line of protocol should. The debate over Dowager Queen Camilla versus Queen Dowager versus some gentler invention is not really about words. It is about whether the acceptance Camilla earned will survive her husband, or whether it was always conditional on him standing beside her. Somewhere in the palace's future, there is a single line of official stationery waiting to be written. One line, chosen by a new king, that will fix Camilla's place in history forever. Forbidden, invented, blessed, crowned, and now, whatever comes after. That line does not exist yet, but the pen is already moving toward the paper, and for the first time in this whole extraordinary story, it is not in her husband's hand. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on, because the moment the palace signals anything official about the future of Camilla's title, we will cover it here first. And now we want to hear from you. When the time comes, what do you think Camilla should be called? And does she deserve to keep her royal style for life? Tell us in the comments below, and we will see you in the next one.